You know, even though we've kind of done this twice now, I don't think we've given a proper name to these videos where we introduce a new series that we're going to be covering soon. Well, not today. I think we should now give it a proper title. So from now on, these videos will be known as, Magical Girl Spotlights. Yeah, it's good enough. But yeah, with our bi-weekly reviews of PPGZ almost done, we may as well give a little preview of what's next on the pipeline. And frankly, after all these toy properties, I think it's high time we got away from the overly corporate entity to another overly corporal product. I mean, hey, at least this company sponsors NGPW, so that's a definite plus. Bushiroad for many here in the States might be more well known for their card games like Vanguard, Buddy Fight, or even Y Schwartz. You may also know them for their multimedia franchises like Bang Dream and Revue Starlight, which both produce stuff like mobile games and musical performances on top of their base anime and manga. However, for our purposes, we're going to be taking a look at the OG of these examples. How OG are we talking? Yeah, I bet this is quite the blast from the past, ain't it? Tantei opera Milky Holmes was created both as an anime and PSP visual novel at pretty much the same time. It followed the adventures of the titular four magically powered detective girls, taking on a team of equally magical phantom thieves. Yeah, sound familiar? Yeah, I'll admit, another reason we decided to cover this franchise was because I kept hearing talk about people saying, oh, wouldn't it be great if there were like a detective-themed Precure series? To which I say, no, not really, especially when this franchise was a thing for almost a whole decade. Granted, I certainly wouldn't put it past Toei to steal from other creators, but frankly, I don't think they would be crazy enough to try and top this franchise when it was at its peak. Yeah, we'll get to that. But anyway, going back to that synopsis, both sides of the conflict referred to their magical abilities as toy, which were supposedly linked to their hearts in the form of flowers that, yeah, we certainly haven't seen this enough in magical girl anime now, have we? But yeah, both the games and anime followed this base premise and then proceeded to go in very different directions, essentially creating two different timelines. Now, of course, this does kinda make sense as games and anime are two very different media, and what works in one media isn't necessarily going to work entirely in the other. God knows trying to incorporate everything from the original Fate light novels would be insane. However, this franchise was a special case as their games and anime had very different staffs, especially their director and head writers. On the game side, the director was Takaaki Kidani, a name in the anime industry that you really should get to know, as on top of being the founder of Broccoli, he also established Gamers, the retail store for anime and games in Japan. Thus, when he founded Bushiroad and Milky Holmes was going to be their first big project, he personally oversaw the game's production. He's also currently on the NGPW board of directors and even briefly served as their chairman. As a result, he did win Booker of the Year from the Wrestling Observer, which I would say is quite the accomplishment, if not for the fact that they also gave that award to Tony Khan. But I digress. The scenario writer of the game was Hideaki Koyasu, who was a perfectly fine writer. I mean, he has secondary written for shows that I've really enjoyed, like Yuri Yuri, Love Lab, Gabriel Dropout, and wrote the entirety of 3 Leaves, 3 Colors. So yeah, he specializes in cute girls doing cute things, which was what the original game was, with some mystery elements. In the games, Milky Holmes seemed like a fun enough and competent team of magical girls. Yeah, just remember that little detail. And while I haven't played the game myself, it did seem to be successful enough that it warranted a sequel. Now, that's all fine and good, but I think most people remember this IP for its anime, and well... The director of the anime was Makoto Moriwaki, a very good and appropriate creator for this show, as she also directed pretty much the entirety of Sanrio's Onegai My Melody. It was a cute, mascot-driven franchise with a bit of a cynical edge, which does reflect in a lot of Moriwaki's work, especially here and Iruma-kun, which, speaking of which, that series was the second time she worked with head writer Kazuyuki Fudeyasu, the first time being with our current subject matter. And the best way I can describe him is that he's the holy shit, that writer guy. Like, on the one hand, this guy also kind of does vanilla slice-of-life cute anime girl stuff, like Is the Order a Rabbit, and even kind of Girl's Last Tour, and yet even within a show like the former, there's a distinct darkness that you can feel festering from within, and as it rises to the top... Yup, just look up this dude's filmography, and you'll find at least one Dark Horse anime that you enjoy, and yet some of your friends might not know about it, and you don't want them to know about it. Shame is for the weak! Yeah, I'll just say it. This guy might very well be my favorite writer of all time, if only based on the fact that a good chunk of my anime collection are his shows, and I'm even still watching his stuff to this very day. In particular, I think his comedy really works, as above all else, he understands that while of course big punchlines are important, you also do need to properly build up the characters delivering said punches. If you don't have that, then at best, you'll have a joke that might agitate a surprised chuckle, but not a real laugh. Thus, he tends to stuff as much characterization as he can within a lot of time, and usually does it very effectively. And in order to do that, he often builds his characters as total losers, because what otaku can't relate with that? And now I'm depressed. But yeah, this is where the big divide between the games and anime come in. First, other than some likely non-canon OVAs and sparse cameos here and there, the characters of Opera Kobayashi and Ellery Himeyuri were mostly removed from the series. The two were the player characters of the first and second game respectively, acting as the leaders of the team and telling them how to use their powers. They still do exist in the anime-verse, and seem to have fulfilled similar roles, but for the most part, Milky Holmes was left up to their own machinations. And on their own, they were, For unexplained reasons, their toys deactivated, forcing them to be detectives the old-fashioned way. Interestingly, this was basically what happened to Kobayashi, hence why he was the player character barking orders at the girls in the game. However, while he managed to adjust to essentially becoming quirkless, Milky Holmes weren't as graceful. Thus, much of the story, and in turn the comedy of the first two seasons, came from our protagonists bumbling their way through cases, and often becoming big useless leeches, especially during the second season. A very far cry from their competent game counterparts, to say the least. It was both hilarious, and also led to some good character moments on both sides of the conflict. For Milky Holmes, while they often came off as less effective detectives than even Leslie Nielsen, they did mostly still have good hearts, and tried their best to help out even without powers. Meanwhile, their main antagonist, Phantom Thief Arson, went through a legit great character arc of dealing with having lost her rivals who gave her life purpose. Yes, there is in fact actual plot to this character, so let's just get that meme out of the way. Also, yes, she was named after Arsène Lupin, one of the most famous fictional thieves ever. Thus, appropriately, they pulled a Lupin III and made all of the major characters descendants of famous crime and mystery literary characters. Nero Wolfe, Hercule Poirot, Cordelia Gray, and of course, Sherlock Holmes. Actually, fun fact, that copyright-safe name was originally used when Maurice Leblanc, the author of the Lupin books, tried to do an unauthorized crossover with the Great Detective in his books. Hey bro, don't try and do the MCU thing, that's kind of run its course by this point. But yeah, this is likely why Arsène took particular interest in Sherlock in the show, to the point that she did get a little touchy. Why yes, that is in fact SDEF's actress Satomi Akisaka. What tipped you off? Speaking of which, another thing that I think really propelled Milky Holmes were their great performances by their VAs, who also provided the vocals for many songs in the franchise, doing it even in full cosplay regalia. On a little sidebar, this would also lead them to playing 2/3 of the main 6 from Gen 4 My Little Pony when Bushiroad acquired the Japanese dubbing rights. They would even kinda match them based on colors and sort of personalities. I mean, let's see, an energetic pink girl with reality warping powers. I wonder who she could play. And yeah, Nero was an orange and yellow tomboy, so of course she played AJ, but things were a little different for the remaining two. I mean, Cordelia would play the blue Rainbow Dash, but personality-wise, she was more like the pimp and proper Rarity, so she would have to change up her vocals significantly to the point that she would end up practicing for her role as Tomoko Kuroki later. Lastly, with Hercule, well, the hairs match, but as for the most prominent color... In general, Milky Holmes would become a big jumping off point for their careers. Kind of appropriately, the lead character, Sherlock's VA, Suzuko Mimori, would become the most successful both in voice acting and in life. Yeah, not only has she been the only Milky so far to successfully jump the fence into the Precure franchise, Bushiroad's connections with NGPW let her meet her eventual husband and baby daddy in the former heavyweight champion Kazuchika Okada.
Maybe that's why Asumi had such a deadly dropkick.
But yes, I do digress. The point is that this show did have an amazing staff provided to us by JC, who more often than not gives us solid productions, other than One Punch Man Season 2.
So with that in mind, was this actually a good comparator with Precure? Well, that's a very apples and oranges comparison. I mean, it'd be like trying to compare any Super Sentai right now with Akiba Ranger.
The former was an easily viewable Sunday morning show meant for a younger demographic, while the latter was a late night program that you had to stay up for, with a lot more themes that you don't want the kids to immediately learn about, like...
I mean, we all know Pinkie Pie is into the kinky stuff, but you're not supposed to say that out loud.
That said, like with Akiba Ranger to the tokusatsu genre, any form of magical girl variety is always appreciated, especially when both genres do have older fans who want to watch these kid shows with a little more edge.
In fact, even if they are a bit of a niche audience, you really should try and maintain them. Otherwise, if you stray a little too far, you get... yeah...
So, while I am looking forward to covering the first 2 seasons of the series, as well as some of the OVAs and final movies and specials, some of the stuff in between was just, Okay, so after the second season, a couple of TV specials were made called The Alternatives, which seemed to take place more in the universe of the games, with Kobayashi coming in as a main character, and Milky Holmes actually being competent. And as their own thing, they were fine one-offs, even if myself and others did prefer the more cynical take on the characters when they were bumbling, yet still well-meaning enough heroines. However, I guess someone at Bushiroad didn't get the memo and figured that for their next series, they'd maintain this competent Milky Holmes, whilst also suddenly introducing a couple of new characters. Oh, and just try and guess what this show featuring 2 magical girls in black and white was called. As a result, we got a season that actually did feel like a Precure series with less of the raunchier elements, and yet was still airing late at night. This left the series in an awkward middle ground where kids were unable to watch it, and its established audience found it less entertaining. Thus, Futari became a massive low point for the series, with Blu-ray sales dropping by a staggering 70%. They tried to correct this with the following series, Milky Holmes TD, where they tried to find a more solid middle ground with the competent Milky Holmes, and yet still bringing in some of the comedy of the first 2 seasons. However, and while I do think TD was better than Futari, both shows ultimately lacked 2 important things: Moriwaki and Fudeyasu, who didn't work on either show. There was just no replacing either the director or the head writer, as the anime versions of these characters were their creations. Thus, thankfully, they were able to end the franchise on their terms, with a final movie and TV special, with either one really acting as a very satisfying ending.
Ultimately, we will try to cover everything this franchise has to offer, anime and game alike. Though, considering that this show was a little bit shorter at 10 minutes per episode, maybe we'll just clump them all into one video.
But yeah, that was a little summation of most of this franchise. We'll get more into the finer details when the reviews do actually start, but do feel free to let me know your thoughts on these magical girl detectives. Which do you prefer, the anime or gameverse? And who do you think would win a fight, Cheryl or Conan? Let me know in the comments below.
And until then though, farewell for now my friends, and if you'll excuse me, my neighbor Hanzawa has invited me over for dinner. Don't know why he asked me to bring my own knife, but oh well.